Okay, everybody, welcome back. Email us as always, freedom@charliekirk.com, and subscribe to our podcast. We're here at the mobilebitcoin.com studio. Joining us now is one of my favorite people, and when he speaks, I listen. I've also taken his Hillsdale online course. It's incredible. It's Victor Davis Hanson, author of the forthcoming book, updated paperback edition of The End of Everything, How Wars Descend into Annihilation. And boy, is that a great way to describe what's happening between Russia and Ukraine. Victor Davis Hanson is also a senior fellow at the Hoover Institution. Great to see you, Mr. Hanson. Thank you for taking the time. I want to just allow you the opportunity to go deeper into something you said recently. You said, quote, "It's over. I don't think there is a Democrat Party right now." What did you mean by that? And please take some time to explain.
Well, you can ascertain that by a lot of factors. We've never really seen the Republican Party register more voters in a year or any definite period that was defined than the Democratic Party. And we're seeing, in addition to that, massive defections from the Democratic Party to the independent affiliations. And then we see this astounding statistic that while the white vote in 16, 20, and 24 stayed pretty constant, the reason that Donald Trump won the popular vote the third time around was a 55% of Hispanics and maybe anywhere from 23 to 25% Hispanic males, and then 20 to 25% of black males. So the data shows that something's going wrong. And then you look at the popularity indices, and there's about 35% popularity for the Democratic Party. That doesn't mean that they can't win a binary election if they run, that just demonize Trump and say that, we don't represent anything, we just represent non-Trump. And it's always harder to have a counter-revolution restoration in a year than it is easier to destroy things in 4 years like I think the Biden period did. But the question I think you're asking is, what happened to them? Why? And I think there was a lot of factors. One is we have 50 million people who were not born in the United States. And so when you look at a lot of the signature candidates or politicos in the Democratic Party, whether it's the Squad, Ilhan Omar, or Mondami, the first and second generation, they were not receptive to the idea of civic education, or we didn't offer it to them. So assimilation, integration may have taken place on a personal level, but it surely didn't in an Americanization. And so we brought a lot of people into the country, and yet when they set foot here, most of them were from the former third world. Their attitude was, the left offers me all sorts of benefits, free this, scholarships, student loans, DEI preference, affirmative action, and the right is more entrepreneurial. So you see a breakdown of a lot of immigrants who are entrepreneurial, electricians, plumbers are voting Republican, but the elite that has had a very powerful effect on the Democratic Party, the elite first and second generation immigrant, especially on matters of Israel or DEI. The second thing, very quickly, is the universities are not liberal biased anymore. They're socialist biased, and they have trained the elite of the Democratic Party. Third, globalization favored a bi-coastal elite that had global skills, media, law, high-tech, corporate boardroom, and it disadvantaged people in the interior, that were natural resource extraction, farming, mining, timber, assembly, things like that, muscular labor. And there was a vocabulary that, as we've talked about, irredeemables, deplorables, clingers, dregs, chumps. I think Biden's latest was garbage. And that kind of became a credo of the Democratic Party. We're the professional classes, and we're smarter because we got really wealthy out of globalization, and now we can concentrate on utopian agendas like transgenderism or New Green Deal, but they lost touch, in other words, with the old lunch bucket middle class of the Democratic Party. So if you look at 92 and 96 Clinton convention agendas, they were paranoid about drifting too far at least rhetorically, from the middle class. They were for closed borders, they were for unions, they were for tough policing, etc. They were for trying juveniles as adults in some cases. So that was it. And then finally, Charlie, if you look at the fertility rates of red and blue, the top 10 fertile states going up to 2.1 to 1.8 are all red, and the bottom from 1.5 all the way to 1.3 are all blue. And you've got about a 4 million person exodus in addition. So there's a sense in the Democratic Party that they're paranoid, or that their model of a blue state professional, especially women who maybe have one or no children, and they want to concentrate, as AOC said, on things like global warming rather than child raising and traditional families. That has an influence as well, and you can see that with the demonstrations. The type of person who goes to those anti-ICE radical demonstrations tend to be single women or professional women, especially. They're overrepresented. All of those add it all up, and I think it's a different Democratic Party, and it'll have to have a McGovern-like disaster before it wakes up.
So let's zero in on that, Mr. Hanson. And again, the book is The End of Everything. It's incredible. How are you thinking about Mamdani? Mamdani wrote an op-ed. It's kind of some of the news today. The elements of my platform are all about affordability. I'm a democratic socialist. When New Yorkers ask me what it means, I take the words of Martin Luther King, who says, call it democracy, call it democratic socialism. There must be a better distribution of wealth for all God's children in this country. How are you thinking about Mamdani? He's likely to be the next mayor of our largest city. And so while you're contesting that the Democrat Party doesn't really exist, the very insurgent wing is about to conquer America's largest city. How are you thinking about it, and what is the major takeaway here? Victor Davis Hanson.
Yeah, well, I think he's going to win, but he's going to win on about the basis of somewhere between 11 and 15% of the resident population. Voting for mayor is not like for president, so you're not going to get a big turnout, and they're going to split the vote three ways, and the vote between Curtis Silwa and Eric Adams and Cuomo together is going to probably be about 50%. So I don't know if that's accurate. The other thing is that New York is a little different. About 30 or 40% of the population is on rent control, and probably over 1 million people are either working for city or state government in New York, or they're working for kind of affiliated NGOs that have government contracts. So it's not representative of the United States as a whole. But you make a good point when you would say, well, Victor, wait a minute. They elected Giuliani and they elected Bloomberg, and these people were moderates or conservatives in some sense. So why did they change to this? And I think it's this idea that this professional class that I talked about, especially single metrosexuals, urban people, they're highly educated, and they feel that for a variety of reasons, they are not getting the type of deference or advantages that they feel that their superior morality and intellectual ability and education and degrees warrant. So it's basically an appeal to the upper white professional class and the subsidized poor. But I don't think it's representative of America in general. But it surely is. Go ahead.
I love that. So, no. I want to just put a bow on that. I have to talk about one of our partners. We're going to blow through the break. So then I want to extrapolate how we might, this is my thesis, and I believe you agree, we might see more Mamdanis if we do not create a culture of ownership, and how private property ownership, owning land, is the greatest deterrent from Mamdaniism and Marxism. If that were to spread, it would only spread because we have a nation of renters and not owners. I want to pick that up in just a second with Victor Davis Hanson. Check out his very important book, The End of Everything, How Wars Descend into Annihilation, with Victor Davis Hanson. Can you pick up on what I was saying, author of End of Everything, on we need a society of owners, not just renters, which I believe is one of the reasons why if Mamdaniism were to become a spreading virus, it would be because of that. Victor Davis Hanson, please.
Yeah, I wrote a book about that called The Other Greeks, that the origins of Western culture occurred around 700 BC, when all of a sudden there were radical changes in land ownership, population increases, and a rise of a small but predominant agrarian class, 10-acre farmers. Same thing when this country was founded, 90% of people were agrarian. And that was the idea that Jefferson said, when people are piled up in the cities and they don't own property, then it's not going to work, because it depends on an autonomous, self-reliant person to take on the responsibilities of consensual government. So I agree with that. And the problem is, Charlie, is that you look at home ownership, and across administrations and decades, it's still stagnated around 62%, 60%. It's about the same percentage as the labor participation rate. And I don't know, part of it is the rise of the welfare socialist state that creates laxity and dependency. But the other problem is the interest rates have been too high, and the regulations have been too steep. So here in California, the average small, 1,800 square foot home is $1 million, and the interest rates are 7%. So to the degree people are buying houses or have houses, they're inheriting either the house, second home, or their house from their parents, or they're inheriting the capital, or they're being lent the capital from their parents who were from a different generation when it was much easier to buy a home. So you're right that the Republicans have to address that. And it's taken the Republicans very quickly a little while to adjust that they're a populist, nationalist, middle-class party, because if you listen to what Mitt Romney was saying, or John McCain, or the Bushes, it was always, let's lower the capital gains rate, or let's privatize Social Security, or let's deregulate. There was some logic to it, but it ignored the idea that the middle class is the largest group in America, and you can win elections if you have free market solutions to the inability to buy homes.
So about 1 minute remaining here, just really quick. I had a conversation recently with a hedge fund type. He said, but Charlie, owning is a failed and is an old concept. He didn't say failed, an older concept. It's very inefficient. Renting is much better, and you can maximize your returns. What would that mean for us politically as a country, as a polis? Forget the economics of it, but if you just become a society of renters, what does that do to a people? About 1 minute, Victor Davis Hanson.
It makes people dependent on a landlord, so they don't know when they're going to be there. And if the window breaks, they don't feel like they're going to fix it. They're not going to paint the interior. It doesn't require any self-discipline or reliance or independence. You own your home; nobody can take it away from you, and you can say, "I want to fix it up, improve it, and I want to pass it on to my children." And then that creates a larger idea that you fix things and you take care of them and you're a custodian. But when you're a renter mentality, it's like, somebody will take care of it. I'm not going to worry about it. I don't really worry about taxes. I don't worry about interest rates. I don't worry about anything. All I do is get mad at my landlord because he increases the rent, and I don't know why he does it.
That's right.
Because I don't pay taxes.
I ask people all the time, when's the last time you washed a rental car? Not usually. You return it pretty dirty because someone else is going to take responsibility for it. How would you answer the question, what is an American, Victor Davis Hanson?
It's somebody who accepts the general principles of the Constitution and consensual government. Second, it's somebody who empirically, not just by blind obedience or doctrine, believes that the United States is singular and better than the alternative. I think that's very important. And third, it's somebody, because we're the only real successful multiracial democracy in history, who believes their superficial appearance or their ethnic, racial background, religious, is incidental to who they are, that's not essential. What's essential is they're an American that transcends race and religion and gender and sexual orientation. But if you don't do that, then you're going to end up like these large democracies that are multiracial, multi-ethnic, that don't work, like Brazil or India, where you have caste systems and racial tensions and racial essentialism.